Hey guys, tonight we're going way back, way before the Shire, before Gondor, before the world even had a proper dawn. The stars are new, the forests smell of untouched rain, and somewhere deep beneath the earth, something old is already plotting. You can hear it in the stillness, a heartbeat too steady, too deliberate, waiting for someone to step too far from the light. You probably won't survive this walk through the beginning, but at least you'll understand how horror doesn't just appear. It's made. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I mean, you don't want to anger the dark powers by pretending, right? And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin in silence. The stars of the First Age still shine cold and sharp, their light untainted. The elves have just awakened by the waters of Cuivienen, blinking at a world so pure it almost hurts to look at. They're curious, fearless, and unbearably radiant in their innocence. But somewhere in the far north, beyond the reach of those newborn songs, a shadow has noticed them. Melkor later called Morgoth, the first and greatest rebel of creation, watches with fascination. He sees not beauty, but opportunity. He was once among the mightiest of the Valar, a craftsman of worlds, but envy has eaten through him. Where others sing to create, he twists the music to control. And when he looks upon the children of Ilúvatar, the first thinking beings of Middle-earth, he feels only hunger. No one knows exactly when he takes them. Some say the first vanishings happen under starlight, elves wandering too far while exploring the dark forests near the Sea of Helkar. They hear strange flutes or see faint glows among the trees, and they follow, curious. Then the forest swallows them and they're never seen again. Others whisper that Morgoth used illusions, dreams sent across distances, voices mimicking loved ones, to lure them north toward Utumno, his fortress beneath the mountains of shadow. You walk through that frozen north now, feeling the temperature drop with every step. The snow crunches beneath your feet, and somewhere in the wind, something almost human sighs. The mountains here are hollow, carved by hands too patient for mercy. You can smell iron and ash, Utumno, the heart of corruption. Inside you glimpse it, vast chambers of cold fire and living stone. This is where beauty will be broken. Chains line the walls, and the air trembles with a sound that isn't quite screaming, more like a melody being forced off key. The elves who are taken are subjected to torments beyond comprehension, not simply physical pain, but spiritual distortion. Morgoth doesn't just want servants. He wants mockery. That's the part no one likes to linger on. It's one thing to conquer. It's another to pervert. The chroniclers later debate this endlessly. Were the first orcs truly corrupted elves? Did Morgoth take the immortal, graceful firstborn and twist them until they became something grotesque? Some say yes, that the darkness can only imitate, never create. Others insist it's myth, that orcs were shaped from earth and hatred directly, with no living soul to start with. The truth hides somewhere between horror and blasphemy. You move deeper into the caverns, and you can almost see the process unfold in abstract. Elves turned into creatures that still remember beauty but can never reach it again. Imagine being cursed with nostalgia for your own lost purity. That's what gives Orcish cruelty its edge. They don't just hate others, they hate themselves for what they used to be. A few of the tortured captives break. Some resist until their spirits fade entirely, dissolving into nothingness. But those who survive long enough begin to change, skin graying, eyes hardening, language turning guttural and sharp. They no longer sing the songs of starlight. They snarl their pain into crude laughter. The first orcs aren't born, they're unwritten. You can feel Morgoth's satisfaction radiating through the halls. He's done what no Valar dared to do, create life through torment. It's a perversion of divinity, the first successful counterfeit of the Creator's gift. And as the centuries unfold, he refines it. He studies the breaking points, how much light a soul can endure before it shatters, how long despair takes to overwrite memory. You almost admire the precision, almost outside the world continues to grow unaware. The elves wander west, guided by messengers of the Valar, drawn by promises of peace. But even as they journey, whispers of the lost ones follow them. Songs are written about those who vanished. Songs that never quite end, because no one knows where the missing have gone. You hear one such song faintly in your memory, soft and haunting. It speaks of silver eyes dimmed by sorrow, of laughter turned to shrieks. The melody trembles on the edge of forgetting like a lullaby that no longer comforts. Some claim those songs reach even into Utumno's halls, driving the corrupted elves mad with half-remembered beauty. Maybe that's the worst torture of all, to recall the light while buried in the dark. Morgoth, however, isn't done. He begins teaching his new creation's language, or at least a cruel parody of it. The Black Speech isn't born yet, but its foundations echo here, short, hard syllables, efficient and brutal. The orcs learn quickly. Pain is a superb teacher. They learn to mock their captors, to fight among themselves, to obey without hesitation. Morgoth discovers that cruelty can be a form of discipline, and yet despite all this, there's something uncanny about them. The elves who fled north centuries later describe seeing shapes in the fog that seemed to almost move with purpose. Not beasts, not men, something in between. And though their forms were twisted, their eyes still gleamed faintly, as if the memory of the stars refused to die. When Morgoth's fortress is finally discovered by the Valar and their hosts, and Utumno is besieged, these creatures vanish into the chaos. Some are slain, others scatter into the deep caverns beneath the earth. And as the fortress collapses, their creator is captured, but his experiments survive. That's how evil wins its first real victory in Middle-earth. Not by dominance, but by endurance. The darkness learned how to breed. You emerge from the ruins now, blinking into cold starlight. The air tastes of metal and sorrow. Somewhere far below, in tunnels too deep for sunlight, the first tribes of orcs are huddled, already imitating their master's cruelty on one another. They have no history yet, no songs of their own, but they will. And as you listen, the earth itself seems to hum faintly, as if remembering the moment when beauty was first rewritten into horror. You descend again, deeper this time, beyond the ruins of Utumno, beyond the memory of mercy. The air thickens with centuries, heavy as smoke that never found an exit. What's left here isn't just darkness, it's the residue of invention. Morgoth's captivity after the War of the Powers didn't end his influence, it preserved it, like a disease lying dormant. The seeds of his work, the first twisted elves, have scattered, growing wild in shadowed places. You walk through one of those caverns now. There's a sound, low and irregular, breathing maybe, or weeping. The torchlight trembles, reflecting off damp walls where shapes move just beyond reach. They're smaller now, leaner. The first orcs have adapted to hiding. Their faces are still vaguely elvish if you squint, cheekbones too sharp, eyes too knowing, but the light hurts them. Their voices rasp like paper tearing. They whisper names that used to mean something. When Morgoth returns, freed under false pretense, he finds his children waiting. Not organized, not loyal, but alive. He doesn't punish them, he perfects them. You can almost see the glimmer of pride in that abyssal gaze, creation through corruption, refinement through ruin. Morgoth resumes his work with new precision. His fortress now lies in Angband, and its furnaces burn hotter than Utumno ever did. The forges ring with sound, metal striking stone, flesh meeting fire. The Dark Lord experiments with endurance, shaping orcs to thrive where others die. Some chronicles whisper he used dark alchemy, mingling their forms with beasts, bats, and carrion birds to craft resilience. Others claim he merely willed their bodies to evolve through suffering, forcing adaptation by pain.
Either way, they grow tougher, meaner, faster. And yet, something in them still remembers the stars.
Once in a while, when they're half asleep, they mutter words in Quenya, elvish words long forgotten by their masters.
They don't know what they mean anymore.
The memory has become reflex, like a muscle twitching after death. It's unsettling even to Morgoth. He doesn't destroy that memory, though. He weaponizes it. The orcs who recall like and hate it more precisely. Their mockery sharpens. Their laughter becomes cruelty sculpted with familiarity. It's the first time in history that evil becomes emotional intelligence. You pass one of their early encampments, half cave, half slaughterhouse. Bones serve as beams. A crude mural smears one wall, painted in soot and blood, shapes of towering figures, the Valar perhaps, and beneath them smaller silhouettes kneeling or burning. This isn't worship. It's resentment with rhythm. The chroniclers in later ages will debate the ethics of this moment endlessly. Were orcs truly alive, with souls capable of choice, or were they just puppets, shells filled with borrowed hate? Some elven philosophers insist no creation born of corruption could hold true spirit. Others argue that if they can suffer, they must be. The debate spirals through centuries, unresolved. You crouch beside a dying orc, one of the early ones, small and brittle, lungs filled with soot. Its eyes lock on yours. There's confusion there, almost pleading, and for a flicker of a moment you sense that buried beneath centuries of cruelty, something remembers. Then it exhales a laugh that sounds like rocks grinding and dies. The smell it leaves behind is iron and grief. Morgoth continues refining his soldiers. He doesn't just need monsters.
He needs armies. And armies require order.
He begins breeding lines, stronger, faster, bred for specific tasks. Those suited for labor become pit orcs, the builders of Angband's endless corridors. The ones who endure sunlight better become scouts, sent to harass the elves near the borders. Morgoth shapes hierarchy into instinct. Fear becomes language. Violence becomes law. And through it all, you can sense his satisfaction. Creation by cruelty, it's his masterpiece. When you watch him pacing through the forges, black armor glowing red in reflected flame, you realize he doesn't see them as slaves or tools. He sees them as proof. Proof that he can make life without permission. Of course, he never calls them orcs. That name will come later. From elven tongues meaning horror or devil. Morgoth's own word for them translates roughly to mock children. It fits too well. Still, even mockery breeds identity. The Orcs begin to call themselves by guttural names: Urk, Gol, Zur. Each tribe developing dialects that sound like rocks trying to speak. Some of those early words survive millennia later, fossilized in the Black Speech.
Linguists of the Third Age marvel at how consistent the root sounds remain, proof that even chaos can hold memory. And then the wars begin. You can feel it coming before you hear it.
The ground trembles not from marching feet yet, but from hunger. The Orcs have multiplied, filling Angband like ants under a corpse. Morgoth turns his gaze south and unleashes them upon the Elves of Beleriand. It's not conquest, it's revenge. Every sword stroke is an echo of the torture chamber. Every arrow carries the resentment of something that remembers the stars. The first battles are carnage. The elves, radiant and untested, face enemies that shouldn't exist. The shock is existential, facing your own reflection in decay.
Morgoth watches from his throne of basalt and laughs, the sound reverberating through Angband's halls like thunder trapped in stone.
His creation works. The Valar might have the light, but he has the noise. Yet even in triumph, there's fragility. Some Orcs disobey. They wander, they hide. Maybe instinct drives them away from Angband's cruelty, or maybe that faint flicker of elven memory whispers that servitude isn't all there is. Morgoth hunts them down, calls them weak, and remakes them with fire. The survivors never disobey again. Still, something new emerges, a grim innovation. The Orcs begin to breed among themselves. The first generation created through torture becomes the ancestors of all others, proof that corruption can reproduce without direct divine interference. Morgoth's legacy is now self-sustaining. That's how evil evolves. It doesn't just destroy, it adapts. You stand at the edge of a battlefield after one of those early wars. The sky is dark with ash. Bodies, elf and orc alike, litter the ground. The silence that follows isn't peace, it's exhaustion. You bend down and notice one of the fallen orcs clutching something, an arrowhead carved with elvish runes.
It's not a trophy.
It's an artifact of memory. And that's the haunting truth. Even monsters remember what they were. Far above, in Valinor, the Valar begin to notice that the stars look dimmer. Maybe it's just the smoke, or maybe the light itself is mourning what's been made beneath it. You come back to sound, metal clanging, chains dragging, a steady rhythm that seems to pulse with the world's heartbeat. It's not the music of creation.
It's the percussion of captivity.
The forges of Angband have never been busier, and you stand among them now, heat pressing against your skin like the breath of something alive. The air is thick with soot and despair, but also
innovation.
You're in the cradle of the orc race, not their birth, but their mass production. The light here never changes. No sunrise, no dusk. Just the same dim orange glow cast by forges, flickering on figures who hammer, twist, and howl in unison. The orcs have become numerous. Morgoth's experiments, his perverse artistry, have produced a stable population, one that breeds quickly and obeys without hesitation. It's the first dark civilization, a society built on repetition and pain. You walk between cages stacked like shelves, each holding something vaguely humanoid. Some sleep, others stare blankly, lips moving without sound.
You catch fragments of whispered words, half curses, half lullabies. The elder orcs tell the younger ones stories about the first days, when they were made by the hand of the master. You can't help but notice the eerie pride in their voices. They think of it as creation, not violation. Morgoth himself rarely visits now. His lieutenants, Balrogs and lesser spirits, oversee production. You see one now, a towering shadow wreathed in heat, inspecting a line of freshly scarred captives. The smell of singed hair and molten iron clings to everything. This is industry before machines, brutality as automation, and through it all, something unexpected happens. The orcs start building more than weapons. They shape crude ornaments, bone charms, fetishes of fear, tiny faces carved into skulls. You watch one orc tying a string of claws around its wrist. Decoration, identity, superstition. Even in corruption, culture seeps through. Later chroniclers will argue about this. Whether the orcs' creativity proves they had free will, or whether it's merely imitation of their elven origin. One elven scribe wrote, "Evil cannot make, only mock." And yet, a mockery that dreams of its own meaning begins to unmock itself. It's the kind of line that makes philosophers stay awake at night. You wander deeper, to where the sound changes, less hammering, more crying, the breeding pits. It's not a sight you'll want to remember. The orcs have become self-replicating, Morgoth's greatest triumph and Middle-earth's enduring curse. The pits smell of blood and smoke. The air is thick with steam and buzzing flies. The newborn wail like dying things, and maybe they are, souls recycled from broken ones, stitched together by hate. You catch sight of a midwife, if the term can even apply, lifting a squirming, grey-skinned infant. She mutters a word in her rough tongue that might mean alive or useful. It's the closest thing they have to love. You step back, heart pounding, and realize something chilling. These creatures no longer need Morgoth. His shadow birthed a system that sustains itself. Pain begets pain. Violence teaches obedience, and fear births loyalty. The orcs have become self-contained darkness. Still, they evolve. Some tribes adapt to life above ground, raiding by starlight. Others remain in the deep, their skin growing pale and eyes enormous. You pass through one such cavern where torchlight reveals paintings, yes, paintings of their hunts. Rough depictions of elves, men and beasts. In every image, the orcs win. These murals aren't just boasts. They're history rewritten in charcoal. You almost laugh at the thought, evil inventing propaganda. And yet, there's something almost human in the attempt. They're trying to make sense of themselves. They don't know why they exist, only that they must fight. You overhear an orc shaman chanting, voice guttural and rhythmic, asking the dark to grant more strength, more sons, more hatred. But the phrasing sounds almost prayerful. It's not faith, it's habit.
A leftover of the souls that once sang to the stars. At one point, you find a cavern that seems older, untouched.
Inside lies a strange relic, an elven harp, cracked and silent, its strings missing. Someone's painted crude runes across its frame, marks that might mean enemy or power. It's a relic of their origin, repurposed as a symbol of triumph over what they once were. Irony has rarely been so complete. Above ground, the world trembles with the echo of their presence. Villages whisper of night demons who burn forests and feast on travelers. The elves, once immortal and serene, now sleep with blades nearby. Even the beasts of the wild have changed. Wolves learn to hunt in packs beside the orcs, feeding on scraps of their wars.
The darkness spreads like an idea. There's an old fringe tale among lawkeepers that Morgoth once tried to fix one of his creations. A failed experiment, too gentle, too kind. They say he kept it in a cage for years, trying to teach it hatred, and when it couldn't learn, he fed it to the others. Whether that story's true doesn't matter. The image lingers, compassion as a defect. Still, even Morgoth's perfection has cracks. His orcs are strong, yes, but unstable.
Rage and fear make them unpredictable.
Whole tribes vanish into the mountains, refusing to fight when the Valar wage war again. A few even worship the light in secret, burning torches in deep caves, whispering in broken Quenya, let it be. Their descendants will one day crawl out of myth as something else entirely. But that's another story. For now, you watch them from afar as they spread across the northern lands, small groups splintering off, forming primitive clans, building crude fortresses of bone and blackened timber. Each tribe develops its own dialect, its own rituals, its own word for enemy, which often means everyone else. The darkness breeds diversity, if you can call it that, and so the first Orc society takes shape, not a nation, not yet, but a living ecosystem of fear. They hunt, fight, breed, and build in cycles, mirroring the natural order in the most unnatural way. You can almost respect the efficiency, almost far above the stars continue to shine.
They don't judge.
They've seen worse, maybe, but you feel their light struggling to reach this place, like a memory of something sacred pressing against a sealed door. You step back toward the surface, ears ringing with the sound of hammers and screams blending into rhythm. It's the song of a people born in torment who learn to turn pain into culture. Somewhere in the distance, an orc laughs, a short, sharp sound that somehow echoes pride. You realize that in their own way, they've achieved what Morgoth wanted most: permanence. They are his shadow made flesh, and they will outlive him. For now, the furnaces burn on, and the dark civilization beneath the earth hums with grim purpose. Above them, the world still sleeps, unaware that its nightmares have already begun walking. You step out of the heat of Angban's forges and into wind, cold, sharp, and smelling faintly of iron. It carries the noise of movement, thousands of feet, armor clinking, snarls breaking rhythm. The orcs are marching. They no longer crawl or cower. They move with purpose, a black tide spilling across Beleriand. From this moment on, they will be more than the products of pain. They will become an army that can make the world tremble. The first great battles between elves and orcs are nightmares sung into legend. The Noldor arrive, brilliant and furious, their blades glowing with starlight, their vengeance practically audible. Against them rise Morgoth's legions, endless ranks of twisted beings that still vaguely resemble their kin, its beauty meeting its reflection in a shattered mirror. You stand between them as the two sides crash, and for a moment the world stops breathing. The clang of steel on bone, the hiss of arrows, the sharp tang of blood, you can taste it in the air. The elves move with grace, but the orcs fight like memory itself. Chaotic, repetitive, unstoppable. They don't care about victory or loss. They fight because it's the only language they understand. Still, they're learning. That's the frightening part. Morgoth isn't just breeding soldiers, he's breeding tacticians. His lieutenants experiment with formations, with command structures, with fear as a weapon. The Orcs begin to organize under captains, forming legions that move like organisms rather than mobs. They develop signals, drumbeats, horn calls, crude banners painted with the eye and the flame. The first real armies of darkness take shape here, and Middle-earth has never seen anything like it. There's an odd pride among them too. The Orcs start boasting of their kills, wearing trophies of bone and silver stolen from Elves. Their armor is mismatched, but strangely personal. Some wear elven mail taken from fallen foes. Others craft grotesque imitations of noble helms. One particularly bold chieftain, so the lore-keepers say, wore a crown made from broken blades. Morgoth rewarded him by melting it to his skull.
Leadership lessons in Angband were
direct, and yet, somewhere amid the carnage, you sense something else, fear. Not of battle, but of stillness. The Orcs can't rest. When they stop moving, they start remembering. Some scholars of the later ages think this was the curse's hidden cruelty. The silence of peace brought back echoes of who they were. That's why they crave noise, war, motion.
anything but thought. You ride along with a warband one night, their campfires low and red.
They roast meat that probably wasn't a beast when the day began, and they tell stories, ugly, loud, surprisingly funny in a gallows sort of way. One orc jokes about an elf who begged for mercy and got it in the form of a quicker death.
Another swears he once saw Morgoth smile, which earns disbelief and mockery.
You can't help but smirk. Even monsters tell tall tales, but the humour fades when the conversation shifts. One of them, older, mutters about the stars.
Too many eyes, he growls.
They see what we were. The others jeer and throw bones at him, but they glance upward anyway. Even hatred remembers beauty no matter how hard it tries to forget. The war stretches for centuries. Morgoth's hosts ravage the north. The elves strike back with fire and vengeance. Neither side can fully destroy the other. And in between, the orcs grow, stronger, more numerous, more adapted. They start breeding specialized types, scouts that move like shadows, berserkers that fight until they burn out. The chronicles of the Noldor describe them as varied as the nightmares of the fallen. You pass through the aftermath of the Dagor Aglareb, the glorious battle. The elves claim victory, but at a terrible cost. The field is covered in corpses, blackened, bloated, indistinguishable. The orc dead lie in heaps, but already crows and carrion beasts feast upon them, spreading corruption across the land.
Even in death, they serve their master. Among the ruins, you find a strange artifact, an elven journal, its script trembling from exhaustion.
The last line reads, "Their eyes hold memory."
And that is the deepest wound. You close the book and feel a chill that has nothing to do with the cold. The lore masters of later ages will never agree on what the orcs truly were.
Some claim they had no souls, only shadows. Others argue that their spirits were those of elves, twisted but unextinguished. A few even propose that Morgoth's power, so vast and primal, bled into them, granting them a sliver of his consciousness, an echo of his will. That would explain why they all fear silence. Silence is when they hear him whisper. Meanwhile, the orcs themselves don't question any of it. They live, they kill, they multiply. Some are captured by the elves. and the tales of those interrogations are haunting. When asked who their father is, they answer, "The dark." When asked what they desire, they say, "To serve until all is dark." When asked why, one is said to have replied, "Because light hurts." You wonder whether it's metaphor or memory. Over time, their language solidifies. The proto-black speech spreads across the armies, unifying them more effectively than any banner. It's efficient, cruel, and expressive enough for threats but not for poetry, which of course suits them perfectly. And yet, some fragments of older elvish words linger within it like fossils, reminders that even hatred needs a vocabulary. When Angband finally unleashes its full might, the Dagor Bragolach, the Battle of Sudden Flame, the Orcs march again, now alongside dragons and balrogs. The land burns and rivers turn to ash. You ride beside them through that inferno, and though the heat sears your skin, you can't look away. This is Morgoth's ultimate orchestra, and the Orcs are his percussion section. Loud, relentless, indispensable. But even in that chaos, something stirs, a flicker of rebellion. Some Orc captains begin turning on each other, hoarding spoils, claiming territory. Morgoth doesn't crush it immediately. Maybe he finds it amusing? Maybe he wants them to reflect his own vanity. Power breeds imitation, after all. When Angband finally falls and Morgoth is cast into the void, the Orcs don't die with him. They scatter, some into the mountains, others into the forests, others deeper underground. Without their master, they're lost, feral, aimless, but they survive. That's the horrifying miracle. Darkness doesn't vanish. It fragments and waits. You stand amid the ruins of Angband now, feeling wind move through its hollow halls. The forges are silent, but the smell of iron and smoke still lingers, as if the stones themselves remember. Somewhere far below you hear a faint sound, a laugh, or maybe a sob.
Hard to tell the difference anymore. And you realize as you step away that the story of the Orcs isn't one of destruction, it's one of persistence.
Morgoth may have forged them, but pain itself became their god, and pain, unfortunately, is immortal. The world has changed. Angband is dust, Morgoth is gone, and the Orcs, well, they're still here. Somehow. You open your eyes to a quieter Middle-earth, one scarred, but breathing again. The stars seem brighter now, as if they're celebrating the Dark Lord's fall. But deep beneath those same stars, in caves and forests and ruins left behind, the remnants of his armies stir. They've lost their master, but not their hunger. You follow them, small bands moving like shadows across the wreckage of the First Age. They're thinner now, less organized, more feral. You can hear them at night, whispering to one another in broken speech, using words that sound like echoes of their old commands. They no longer know who the master was. They only know that they must keep fighting. One night you crouch behind a ridge watching a small group of them build a fire. They huddle close, faces gaunt and grey. One pulls something from a pouch, an amulet made of bone and twisted wire. He holds it up, mutters to it, and then passes it around. It's a ritual, primitive but familiar. They're still reaching for structure, even after the fall of everything that structured them. Over time, those scattered tribes change. Some move east, vanishing into the wild lands near the Sea of Rune. Others creep south into the jungles of Far Harad. They interbreed with men. Yes, that's the unspoken truth of the Second Age. When Morgoth's lieutenant, Sauron, begins to rise, he finds that the darkness didn't disappear. It diversified. The orcs have adapted. Their shapes vary now, some short and sharp-toothed, others tall and grey-skinned. You might pass one in a shadowed alley and never know. A few records from ancient men even describe strange wanderers appearing after Morgoth's fall. Creatures who spoke in rasping tones, traded stolen goods, and disappeared by dawn. Some legends say they taught early human tribes how to forge iron more efficiently, not out of kindness, but as a way to ensure more weapons existed in the world. The Dark Ones taught us war, one old inscription reads, and we learned it too well. That's how evil survives, by becoming useful. You travel east now, into the wilder lands where even maps give up. Here, among the ruins of forgotten kingdoms, the orcs have built small, crude strongholds. Not grand towers like Angband or Barad-dûr, but functional ones, caves reinforced with bone and scavenged stone, surrounded by spiked barricades. There's order again, but born of desperation, not dominance. You meet their new leaders, chieftains who rule by fear, not divinity. They invoke the memory of the dark like a mythic ancestor, claiming to dream his voice. Some might even believe it. Their gatherings are violent but ceremonial, every night ending with chants that sound like thunder turned into language. The words mean nothing now, but the rhythm comforts them. And somewhere in those ruins, Sauron finds them. The chroniclers never agree exactly when it happens. Some say during his years of fair disguise, others when he has already cast off pretense and begun calling himself Lord of Gifts. What's certain is that he recognizes them as his inheritance. The orcs are Morgoth's forgotten instruments, and Sauron knows a tune worth playing again. You stand in the shadows as he approaches one of their war camps, not as a fiery terror, but as a being of terrible calm. The orcs kneel instinctively. They don't even know why. His voice slides through the camp like silk through flame. "You have forgotten the dark," he says, "but I have not." That's all it takes. A new god for an old people. Under Sauron's guidance, the orcs become organized again, but differently this time. Morgoth created them through agony. Sauron refines them through order. He gives them tasks, systems, even ranks. He shapes a hierarchy of cruelty, where obedience replaces creativity and terror becomes currency. Some of the older orcs, those who still mutter in half-elvish, resist at first. They disappear quickly. Sauron brings them back to war, yes, but also to labor. His fortresses rise on the backs of orcs. The foundations of Barad-dûr, the bridges of Nirn, the roads through Mordor's black plains. The clang of hammers you hear isn't just for weapons anymore. It's for empire. Still, there are corners of the world untouched by his order. Wild tribes who refuse to bow, who still whisper Morgoth's name instead of Sauron's. Some lawkeepers call them the Old Breed. They're smaller, meaner, but fiercely independent. There's even one half-mythical clan said to live among glaciers in the far north, worshipping the memory of the stars as enemies they must one day devour. The tale's probably nonsense, but then so was the idea of talking trees, until someone saw Fangorn move. One fringe story from Harad tells of a human chieftain who claimed to be half-orc. He built a city of bone and obsidian that lasted 3 generations before collapsing into civil war. The ruins are said to hum faintly at night, as if the stones remember the screams. Scholars debate whether that hum is the wind or something older still, some fragment of the ancient music Morgoth once perverted. Meanwhile, the orcs who serve Sauron multiply. They intermix with men and beasts, creating new varieties, the smaller, quicker, snugger, the broad-shouldered Uruks, the pale cave dwellers later called goblins. Each new form reflects a purpose. Each refinement brings them further from what they once were. You look at them and realize they've stopped being elves twisted into monsters. They're now a species independent of their origin, and yet not free.
Never free. You walk among them one evening as they rest near the shadow of Mordor.
One young orc, barely grown, pokes at the fire and mutters, "What if we don't fight?" The older one beside him sneers, "Then we're dead." The conversation ends there, but the question hangs in the smoke. Maybe it's impossible for them to stop. Maybe war isn't just habit, it's metabolism. Without it, they starve. As the Second Age unfolds, their legend spreads.
Men who trade near Mordor tell stories of shadows that talk, of screams echoing from the Black Mountains.
The Elves of Lindon claim to find footprints in lands where no army marched. The orcs are everywhere and nowhere, thriving like mold in the cracks of civilization, and, through it all, you can't shake the feeling that something in them, some thin thread of identity, still remembers Morgoth.
Not as a god, not as a name, but as a sensation. The heat, the hunger, the shape of chains. Evil doesn't die.
It leaves fingerprints. You stand at the edge of Mordor's plains as the sun sets, watching their campfires flicker across the horizon like a constellation in reverse. The stars above shimmer with cold light, and for a moment they seem to mirror the fires below. Heaven and hell reflecting each other as they always have. And in that balance the orcs endure, no longer captives, no longer tools, but echoes that refuse to fade. You wake to drums, not the slow ceremonial thuds of ancient angband, but something sharper, industrial, relentless, the kind of beat that makes the earth vibrate like a living heart. You're in Mordor now, near the end of the Second Age. Sauron has gathered his strength, and the orcs have become his machinery. You can feel the rhythm in your bones as you descend through one of the great forges of Barad-dûr. The heat presses against you like a living presence. Molten metal spills through channels, and black smoke curls towards ceilings so high they vanish into shadow. The orcs move in endless cycles, hammer, carry, drag, repeat. They chant under their breath, not for faith this time, but for focus. It keeps them from thinking too long about what they are. Sauron walks among them like a conductor, no longer hiding behind fair shapes. His armor gleams with impossible darkness, his eyes burning like molten gold trapped in iron. When he speaks, the air folds. You watch as he raises one gloved hand, and the line of workers nearest him drops to their knees in unison. Their obedience is perfect, absolute. But look closer. You see something Morgoth never achieved: efficiency. The orcs under Sauron aren't just slaves, they're infrastructure. He gives them purpose through fear, identity through labor. When the great eye finally opens, it's not a symbol of omniscience, it's quality control. You wander deeper into the fortress, past rows of chained beasts bred for war, and pens filled with fresh recruits. The newest generation of orcs, the Uruk-hai, tower over the rest. They're broad, disciplined, and disturbingly articulate. You overhear two of them arguing about strategy, one scoffing that the men of the West fight like cattle. There's pride there, even intelligence. You can't help thinking that if they'd been born anywhere else, they might have been philosophers or engineers. Somewhere, a group of men taken as prisoners is being converted. It's quieter now than the horror Morgoth once practiced. The transformation is more subtle, more procedural, a mixture of breeding, conditioning, and alchemical manipulation. The result? Orcs that no longer need divine intervention to exist. Evil, industrialized. Later chroniclers will say, Sauron perfected the art of mass production centuries before men discovered the forge line. You glance around and realize they're right. Barad-dûr is a factory of nightmares, but also a testament to dark innovation. Each hammer strike echoes the logic of empire, and yet even here you see cracks.
Small human cracks. An old orc limps past you, clutching a broken piece of armor like a relic.
When no overseer is near, he sits beside the forge fire, staring into the flames as though waiting for an answer. You realize he's humming a faint, lilting melody. It's not orcish. It's elvish, distorted by centuries, but unmistakable.
Maybe it's memory.
Maybe it's mockery. Either way, it's haunting. The second age ends in fire. You feel the heat from Orodruin as it ignites the horizon. The last alliance of elves and men marches upon Mordor, and suddenly the endless drums fall silent. The orcs, who've been bred for obedience, now face something alien. Defeat. You watch them pour across the battlefield, a tide of black iron and fury. Their roar is not war, it's survival, and yet they fail. When Sauron falls, the world doesn't go quiet. It sighs, the dark towers crumble, the eye vanishes, and the orcs scatter again, just as they did when Morgoth fell. But this time they carry something new, memory of empire. They know organization now. They've learned hierarchy, engineering, even a twisted form of governance. Some flee north and rebuild among the mountains. Others hide deep in Mirkwood, breeding smaller, faster generations that men will one day call goblins. And still others wander, lost, remembering the forges and the voice that once gave them order. You find yourself walking among them centuries later, during the long silence between ages. The world has grown greener again. Forests reclaim battlefields.
Rivers run clear where blood once flowed.
But in the cracks, in the cold caves, the orcs endure. Their speech grows rougher, their faith weaker, their numbers smaller, but they're still there. In the far north, near the ruins of Angmar, you hear whispers of orc clans worshipping not Morgoth or Sauron, but something vaguer, the concept of the Master, an archetype of control and fire. Their rituals involve burning effigies and reciting guttural prayers that sound like broken Elvish. The scholars of later ages will debate endlessly whether this represents true religion or simply habit. One more echo of enslavement echoing through time. Meanwhile, the world moves on. Men rise, kingdoms fall, and few remember that the shadows have names. And then, one day, Sauron returns. It's almost quiet at first. He doesn't need a body to be felt. The whispers start in the east, the promise of a power returning, of old glory rekindled. The orcs hear it first. You can almost see the tremor move through their scattered tribes. like a magnetic pull aligning broken compasses. One night, in a forgotten cave near the Doth, a shaman among the Orcs throws a handful of ash into the fire and gasps. His eyes glow faintly red.
"He's not gone," he croaks.
The dark is watching again. The others fall silent, and just like that, worship rekindles. That's the genius of evil. It doesn't need resurrection. Just rumor. When Sauron re-establishes his dominion in Mordor, the Orcs flood to him.
Not because they love him, but because they understand him.
He's the only thing that ever gave them meaning. You can almost pity them, almost. Their forges roar to life again. Their drums beat the old rhythm, and their tongues twist around new war songs that sound suspiciously like hymns. The Black Speech returns. Its cadence rolls across the plains of Mordor, an engineered language of obedience. Every word a command, every sentence a chain. You stand amid it and feel the history repeating itself with terrifying precision. Yet, amid the chaos, some Orcs still question. You overhear one mutter to another, "Do you think the Master remembers us?" The other snorts. He remembers everything.
That's why we fight. And there it is, the final tragic irony.
The Orcs think their endurance proves devotion. But really it proves something else, that even the smallest spark of identity can survive endless corruption. They are, in a twisted way, proof of resilience. You leave Mordor as the forges flare behind you, knowing what's coming next. The Age of the Ring, the final performance of a very old song. And every note, every scream, every clang of metal will carry the echo of that first cruelty. The one born in Morgoth's dark halls so long ago. Because even when empires fall and masters die, the melody of their making endures. The world stands on the edge again. Centuries have passed since the last alliance, and still the shadows breed. You find yourself in the early years of the Third Age now, moving through a world that looks healed but isn't. The kingdoms of men rise and fall. Elves retreat to the west, and in the quiet corners of Middle-earth, the dark valleys, the damp tunnels, the mines where light barely reaches, the Orcs wait. They've grown smaller, meaner, more cunning. The grand wars are gone, but their hunger hasn't faded. It's just learned patience. You wander through the misty mountains, your breath misting in the cold air. Every echo sounds like a whisper, every crevice like a hiding place. Down below, in an ancient warren, a tribe of Orcs fights over scraps of metal. Their leader, a creature with skin like burnt parchment, shouts in a tongue that's more growl than speech. You recognize bits of the Black Speech mixed with words from half a dozen local dialects. Language evolving through survival, grammar forged in chaos. These are the descendants of Morgoth's first corruption, yet none of them remember his name. To them, the world is simply war and hunger. The irony, that amnesia keeps them alive. They've forgotten gods and masters, and so they endure where empires fall. Still, something stirs. Whispers drift from the east, rumors of a shadow reawakening in Dol Guldur.
A necromancer gathering armies.
You can almost feel the pulse of it, the same rhythm that once beat through Angban's forges and Barad-dûr's towers.
Evil hums like an old song remembered in a dream.
The Orcs hear it first. You watch as small bands begin to move again, guided by that invisible call. Some cross the Anduin under starlight, others crawl from the roots of the misty mountains. They don't know where they're going, only that they're being summoned. And when they arrive, Sauron, no longer hiding behind fair guises, welcomes them. But here's the thing, Sauron's not just resurrecting an army, he's resurrecting meaning. The Orcs are given new purpose, new ranks, new leaders. Among them rises a figure larger than any of his kind, broad, armoured, articulate. An Uruk-hai chieftain named Lurtz, one of the many to come. They are faster, stronger, bred for endurance and daylight. You can almost imagine Sauron smirking somewhere, thinking he's fixed Morgoth's mistakes. When Saruman begins his secret forges in Isengard, the irony deepens. A being once made by divine thought now plays God himself, creating a new breed of orcs with frightening precision. You stand on the edge of one of his pits as the earth belches smoke. They are born from the mud, Saruman says with eerie calm.
And yet they serve reason. You almost laugh, reason.
Indeed. The Orcs of Isengard march with discipline unseen since the First Age. They chant in rhythm, their armor polished, their blades identical. Industrial evil version 3.0. But listen closely. Under the thunder of their boots there's something else. A low hum, almost like mourning. The same echo that haunted the first ones in Angband. And yet, the rest of Middle-earth sees only monsters. When they charge at Helm's Deep, when they swarm Osgiliath, the world recoils in horror, but rarely in curiosity. No one stops to wonder if any spark of memory still burns inside. You do, though. You can't help it. Maybe it's the storyteller in you, or maybe it's that haunting truth you've carried since the beginning, that evil rarely begins as evil. It's often just something bent too far to remember what straight ever was. After Sauron's final fall, the ring melting in Mount Doom, the eye collapsing into flame, the world breathes again. But the Orcs don't vanish. They scatter, confused and leaderless, just like before. You watch them crawl from ruins, blinking at a sun they were never meant to see. Some fight among themselves. Others flee into the mountains, nursing wounds both old and new. And here's the strangest part. In the Fourth Age, when men tell stories to their children about brave kings and wise elves, the Orcs fade into myth.
Monsters of bedtime tales.
Convenient symbols of everything vile. But deep in the far corners of Middle-earth, beyond the reach of Gondor's patrols, beyond even the memory of Mordor, small tribes survive. Not as armies, not as slaves, but as people.
Scarred, crude, half-mad perhaps, but people nonetheless. You sit by one of their campfires centuries later.
They don't know your name, and you don't offer it. They speak in broken words, passing around a crude wooden bowl filled with fermented root drink. One of them, old, with eyes pale as moonlight, leans forward and says something you barely catch. Long ago, we had a song. You ask him to hum it.
He does. It's not Elvish, not black speech.
It's simpler, raw sound carrying rhythm rather than melody. You can't tell if it's a lament or a lullaby. But in that moment you realize what survived all along. Not the hate.
Not the worship.
Just the sound of existence refusing to die. Some say that after the ring's destruction, Eru Ilúvatar himself took pity on the Orc, that their spirits were finally freed to return to whatever broken form of grace they'd once known.
Others argue that's wishful thinking, that corruption cannot be unmade.
But standing there, listening to their rough voices blend into the wind, you start to think maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe survival is its own redemption. And then you remember that first moment back in the depths of Utumno when a broken elf whispered through the pain, "Why?"
You realize this endless echo through ages is the answer. Not justification, not forgiveness.
Just endurance. The Orcs were born of torture, forged in mockery, enslaved by gods and kings alike. Yet they outlived both.
That's not evil.
That's existence at its rawest, ugly, stubborn, undeniable. So when someone calls them monsters, maybe you'll think twice.
Monsters, perhaps, but also mirrors, because in the end, the story of the Orcs isn't about darkness winning.
It's about light, forgetting how to look back. Now, as the night deepens, the fires dim, and your breath slows, the echoes fade. The drums that once shook the earth are only heartbeats now, soft and steady. The shadows of Angband and Mordor dissolve into quiet memory. You feel the world exhale, like an old creature finally falling asleep. Maybe the Orcs are still out there somewhere, singing softly in a language no one remembers, staring at unfamiliar stars. Maybe not. But tonight, you can let that uncertainty cradle you, because every great darkness once began as a question, and every ending, no matter how bleak, still carries a flicker of story. Sleep easy, traveler. The night is old, but you're still here to dream it. So now, as the journey settles into silence, take a long, slow breath. Feel the echoes of battle dissolve into nothing but air. The fires have gone cold, the forges stilled, the laughter of dark lords long faded into myth. What remains is quiet, the kind that fills the spaces where stories end and dreams begin. You've walked through shadow, listened to the heartbeat of despair, and watched life twist itself into something unrecognizable, yet still, somehow alive. Maybe that's the real magic of this tale, not the wars or the wraiths or even the rings, but the persistence of being. The way everything, even the broken things, keeps moving forward. As the last traces of darkness slip away, imagine the stars above Middle-earth, brighter now, gentler. Somewhere far beneath them, a single campfire burns in a forgotten valley, and an old voice hums that same rough melody. You can almost hear it, low and unhurried, rolling like the tide against sleep. The story doesn't need a perfect ending. It only needs rest, so let your eyes drift shut. Let the world grow distant. The orcs fade, the mountains quiet, and the great wheels of history turn softly, like a lullaby too tired to continue. Good night, traveler. May your dreams be gentler than the tales we tell to reach them.